Welcome to Empowered, Mind-Body Inspiration. The mind is the map to wholeness, wellness, health. The heart is the key to genius and inspiration. Join me and my guests as we explore how to release and rewire into who you truly are, unique, whole, and empowered. Please like, share, and subscribe. Spiral up, spiral out. Welcome, everyone. Today we have Sheila Trecartin from Cookstown, Ontario, Canada. Sheila became interested in the holistic field at a very young age and has studied much, but says she learned greatly through her own life experience. She's been practicing in the holistic field for over 2 decades, including sound therapy, Reiki, reflexology, crystal healing, past life therapy, mediumship, energy readings, and so much more. Sheila firmly believes that we all have these abilities, that we need to awaken them and practice in order to comprehend them. Sheila feels the most gratification helping her animal friends to express their needs, wants, feelings, and thoughts through animal communication, and has traveled extensively teaching and offering animal communication and holistic modalities all over the world. Animal communication. I love this. So excited to listen in and learn about these wonderful guests. Let's see how this spirals out. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So excited to have you. So let's talk about, how you honed this skill to communicate with animals, how you first knew you even had it, and then maybe some of the wonderful stories that you can share with us.
Absolutely. Well, it's an interesting story, really, because a lot of people ask me, oh, who taught you how to do this? And it's really interesting when they hear that it's actually a natural ability that I had when I was a child. And I didn't realize that other people didn't share this naturally. So it started off where we lived in the country, believe it or not. I lived in a log cabin in more northern Ontario, halfway between Quebec and a little town in northern Ontario. So there was nothing to do there. As a child, I would go out and I would search out nature. I would play with the animals and I would talk to them, and I didn't realize that other people couldn't do that. And I was sitting in the car one day and there was a fly stuck in the car. So I was talking to the fly, trying to get it to do tricks. And then I said to my mom, oh, the fly tells me blah, blah, blah. And my mom's like, what? And so my parents started to look at me funny when I would tell them that the animals were saying things to me. I was a very shy and introverted child. So quickly, I realized that this wasn't normal. And I so badly wanted to be normal because I was so shy and fearful all the time of what other people were thinking. So that's how it started. I suppressed it at that time, not telling other people about it. But then over the years, the animals would come to me and people would always comment how they really were drawn to me. And I would talk to them, but I wouldn't tell anybody. And then when I was about 18, I started studying in the holistic field. And that really started to change my life. But it wasn't until several years later that I ended up communicating with animals again. I went through chakras and communicating with spirit and communicating with guides, and then back around to the animals much later, and just purely by, I'll call it a divine accident. And I was talking on the phone with a friend of mine, and his dog started coming through. Sorry. His dog started coming through, and I was nervous to tell him that his dog was talking to me. But when I did tell him, he, instead of saying, oh my gosh, that's crazy, he actually said, which one? Because he had 2 dogs. And that started a whole new journey, of course. Mm. And that was him bringing it forward then and telling a whole bunch of people that I could do this. even though I was uncomfortable with it, he forced me to do it. And I wouldn't have this beautiful career of being able to speak with animals every day without him. So I owe a lot to him. Absolutely.
And so they just come to you and you hear what they have to say. Is that how it happens?
Well, that's a good question, because what happened when I was younger, not only could I hear the animals, but I could hear spirit, and I could hear people who have crossed over, and it was rather scary for me. So I felt very intruded upon, I guess would be the right word that I would say. So violated sometimes, because I felt like I couldn't control it. So I worked really hard through my childhood to be able to sort of turn it down or turn it off. And I then learned how to turn it back on. And now what happens is I have to link with an animal to be able to do it. If the animal is with me physically and comes to me, I'll naturally be able to communicate with it. But I don't get intruded upon like I used to when I was a child, because I built up this system of being able to turn it up or turn it down when necessary. So it wasn't overtaking my everyday life. And it's one thing that I love to teach people how to do, because a lot of people who are sensitive or empaths, they always feel overwhelmed and intruded upon themselves. And I teach them about using an imaginary dial where we can just turn the sensory perception down so that we aren't inundated with that information coming from all sources all of the time. So that's what I do. I basically now I'll in person or use a photograph to tune into the animal, and I link with the energy, much like calling someone on a phone. And they pick up and we have a conversation and exchange. It comes through as pictures, feelings, sensations, and sometimes I hear exact sentences or words as well.
Right. So beautiful. I have 7 horses, 2 cats, and 2 dogs.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. I love it. That's brilliant.
Yeah. And, they often get sick. And as a homeopath and a naturopath, I can look at their symptoms and, figure out close to what might be going on. But to have that conversation gives you so many more clues as to how to treat them if it's, trauma from the past or an injury that's just happened. Have you had some experience with that?
Yes, actually, it's a good point, because sometimes when I'm speaking to the animals, they know exactly what is wrong with them. And even in certain circumstances, they know what treatment works for them. They've given me like a specific treatment, or they've given me a medication, even a name of something that works for them, or a supplement that they know will be able to treat what they have. And I even have had them give me different concoctions that I didn't even know it was possible to utilize. I remember there was a dog and had hot spots all over. And when I connected with this dog, it was a German Shepherd, she told me that she would like her owner to make a baking soda paste with warm water and put it on the hot spots and leave it on for about 20 minutes and then wash it off. And this was probably 20 years ago when I got this information. And so I had to research it, and I ended up speaking with a vet, and they said, oh yeah, actually that would work. And it was amazing, because then from that point on, I had a lot of animals who had these conditions that needed this baking soda paste that was so simple, but so brilliant to use. So that's just one example. But they do sometimes know what's wrong with them, but then other times they have no idea, much like us. Like sometimes we go, oh, I know exactly what I did to create that injury. And then sometimes we go, I have no idea. I woke up and I felt that way. So one of the cool things that I do as well is I do an intuitive body scan. And that allows me to walk through the body of the animal to feel their emotional, physical state, as well as to discover past trauma or past life influences, even a spiritual component of them. So I can read the energy that way. So I don't need them to communicate with me directly for that. I override that and I tune into their actual energy system on all levels. And then I'm able to evaluate from that space.
Right. And so sometimes you can find things that even a vet hasn't found.
I get a lot of requests from people who say that the vet wasn't able to figure out what was going on with the animal. But I also have developed a really wonderful relationship with many vets. And now the vet actually will call me. It's pretty phenomenal. Who knew that that would ever happen? But we work in tandem then. And they will, a lot of the vets are surprisingly open to animal communication and the body scanning, and they will take the information and they will work from it. So we've come a long way, because when I first started this, of course, there was not one vet that would be open to this. They were very skeptical. And over the years, they've opened themselves up. And it is pretty amazing how, I mean, and this isn't even just in our part of the world, this is all over the world. I have vets who are very open and accepting of the information, and they will accept holistic insights as well. So it's a really beautiful thing to see.
Right. Well, yeah, if you're open to it, it gives you so many more clues as to where to look and how to help.
Yeah, because like people say, well, if the animal could talk, they would be able to tell us. Well, I love being that bridge and being able to translate what they have to say for their caregivers. I mean, and sometimes it's something that's very simple that they need to share in order to make their lives better. And sometimes it's just that, we live with them every day and we start to miss the clues because it becomes so familiar, and we don't see what's going on with them in the same way as what we would if we were away from them for a while and then came back to them again. So they can express whatever they need to. And you might think that they love something or they enjoy something, and they don't. They're just pleasing you. So it might be, I just, even my own dog, just not, I've only had her for about 5 months now. She's a rescue, and she wasn't drinking a lot. And I was trying to figure out why she wasn't drinking so much. Now she spent a lot of time in a crate and in her life. And I thought that maybe she was just learned not to drink so much because she didn't have access to outside. So I was trying to train her. And then I finally, silly me, but I didn't actually ask her. I was just trying to solve the problem. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? But at one point, I actually said, "Hey, what's going to make you drink more?" And she said, "I'd really love a glass bowl," because I was using this very thick plastic that we had. And I know better, because it's something that the animals, they do ask for all the time, is a more natural fiber to drink from. And it was just something that we started her with. So I switched to a glass bowl, and she drank, I'm not kidding you, at least 3 times as much that day, and then has continued to do that ever since. It's pretty phenomenal. So I
That's
just love
so
that.
simple. So now you're solving I have 2 bowls in the kitchen, but they're both steel. And I have this little bowl close to a water cooler. And both my dogs want to drink from that little bowl. And I'm like, what? Why?
The little bowl is glass?
It's glass, yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. They often ask for glass or ceramic, and we do a lot of times use the metal bowls because we believe that they're cleaner and they're easier to care for, and they're a natural substance. But in a way, that is easier for the animal. It's cleaner. But yeah, the glass seems to be the top choice, and then the ceramic is next.
Yeah.
So quite interesting. There could be other reasons, but that just happened to be that storyline.
Yeah, so good. But even I don't choose a steel water bottle. I don't like the taste that comes off of it. So I'm like, oh, makes complete sense. But we don't think that they, are as particular, but they are.
Yeah, and we think that we're doing something good for them, but we all have individual needs and choices and perceptions, and the animals are the same. They have their own individual personalities that are very unique to them, and they will take on traits of their caregivers. But if we go down to the core of them, they have a very distinctive personality, and people can see that just by, if you have 2 animals, or you have your animal and a friend's animal, you can see the traits that they have and how they think and how they look at certain things. They're all unique to them.
Mm-hmm. So when you were young, I find like recently I've really opened my heart a lot to the animal kingdom. And I was always like that, but the last few years and even the last few months, it's become even more. And I find I connect with them with my heart. And then when I actually speak to them, it's like I'll say something little like, oh, your bowl's in the closet over there. And they know exactly what I mean. Whereas before I would have to take them so how do you connect? Did you find it was through your heart and this deep connection with animals?
Absolutely. My heart has always been totally in love with animals and nature. And I find that is, well, when I first started doing this, I'll backtrack a little bit. When people started to experience it, they kept saying, "Oh my gosh, you have such a special gift. You're so lucky." And I thought, well, I don't think that this is just me. I think that we all have this ability to be able to communicate with animals. And I think that we should be able to awaken that in other people. So I worked with Spirit to develop a program to be able to teach other people how to do it. And one of the first things that Spirit talked to me about was that we need to open their hearts to the animals so that they can link, because that's where animals express themselves from. It's from their heart center. So they work with the heart center or the heart chakra. And for those who understand the concept of chakras, they also obviously use the throat chakra for communication and the third eye for mental telepathy, because they speak with feeling, sensations, and imagery. So most of the time, when you are trying to communicate with your own pet, if you are holding a feeling sensation that matches the image that you have in your mind, they're going to get that impression from you, and they're going to understand the language that you're speaking. And they do naturally anyways. They're always reading our mind. And I always kind of laugh because you have somebody who their brain just does not stop, right? They have that hamster going on the wheel 24/7. And I feel so much for the animals because it's like nonstop chatter to them, because they just pick up all of that all of the time nonstop. But if we slow that down and we hold an image and we send that image to them with intention by focusing on them and focusing on the emotion that we want to send with it, whether that's a happy emotion or a displeasure, then those emotions and that image will be coupled together to send the message to the animal, and they will receive that no problem. I mean, they naturally communicate with us and they communicate with other animals very easily. It's us. We are the ones who have to learn to awaken that natural ability that we all have to be able to communicate with them in that innate language that we have, that we're gifted to at birth. And one of the things I always say to people is like, think about it. When you go to speak, and if I asked you to tell me about your house, what's the first thing that will happen? You get an image of your house in your mind. And then you start to see the different pictures of your home in your head. And then you show me a feeling by how your tone of voice is, by the expression of your energy. And then that gets coupled to give me any information that you want about your house. So you're doing it naturally anyways. Now, if you do it this way with intention, it just is more powerful. The one thing, like I said, if your mind's very chattery, the animal will need to understand that you're actually directing something to it and not still just chattering, because they'll still hear you, but they'll learn to kind of not respond to it. So it's pretty amazing. And I always tell people, like, slow yourself down when you're asking your animal to do something. Then hold the thought in your head and see them doing it. So, when people are asking their dog to sit, for example, we just kind of go sit, 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 and the dog is tuning into our brain at that time. And if our brain is on hurry up, I have to get to work, I'm going to go in the car, the dog's all confused because they're like, you're going in the car? We're going to work? What do you want me to do? So it just gets all jumbled to them. And so we have to slow our brain down to be able to show that specific image of sitting. And then we say sit once, and we hold the thought in our head and we wait, and they will respond so much better. And even if they want to try to do animal communication and not speak, they can just use the image, and if they hone the image very strongly and they're focused, then the animal will actually sit without even having a command, or even come to you if you request that it comes to you from another room and you just see it coming to you over and over in your mind. Then they will actually participate because they will hear you. It's pretty amazing. I love it.
I love it too. Do you have any stories of a horse story that you've communicated with?
Oh, my favorite horse story that I always tell, because it's the one that's the most profound, which you probably will appreciate, is about a horse, and that I was speaking with one of my first horses that I was speaking with. And I went to the farm, and I didn't have a lot of experience with horses. I mean, my mom loved dogs, and I had a cat at one point, but really there was no large animals. So when I first started talking with farm animals and I went to this farm, there was this one horse. And the lady who owned the horse was asking me just to translate whatever the wishes of the horse were, because she knew she was getting elderly and that she didn't have that long to live. So I'm standing at the fence and the horse is in the paddock. And I'm feeling very insecure because this is one of my first horses I've ever read. But I'm trying to do my best for the horse and for the owner. And we're standing there and I'm relaying messages to the woman about her horse. And she's like, oh, yes, yep. Oh, I get that. I understand that. But all the time, this horse is sending me an image of it wearing rubber boots. And I'm like, what does that mean? I have no idea. So she's showing me these boots over and over and over. And I'm so confused because I'm like, horses do not wear boots. I have no idea what this is. But then she gets more animated with it in my mind, and she's dropping these images in where the boots are bigger and they're bright red. And she's clomping around in the field with them. And this is what I see in my mind. So animated. And I start to giggle. And the lady says, you're not telling me something. And I said, I said, she is sending me something, but I don't know how to relay this to you because I have no idea what it means. And you're going to think it's crazy. And she said, oh, just tell me. I'm really open-minded. And I said, okay, well, she's showing me that she's wearing these big boots and they're bright red. And she said, what? And I said, I know, how crazy is that? And she literally started to cry. And I said, oh my gosh, what did I do? And she said to me, oh, you have no idea. She's like, I know what she's saying. She's like, I said, horses don't wear boots. What is she saying? And she's like, oh no, they do wear boots. And she told me about these boots that they had won in the first competition that they ever did in jumping. And that this was so many years ago, but the boots were red. And I said, oh my gosh. So then I went back to the horse and I apologized profusely. And I said, I'm sorry. This was a memory that you really wanted to share. And it was my insecurities that were getting in the way. And how beautiful is that? I almost didn't relay that message. And the horse says to me, I want my boots. I want to wear them now. And I'm like, what? I said to the lady, does she still have those boots? Because she wants to wear them now. And the lady said, oh my gosh, yeah, I have them way back in the tack room. I'll go get them. Well, we took the time. She went and got them. She put them on. I realized, okay, they don't look like rubber boots, but I wouldn't have understood it in any other way. The horse was so magnificently intelligent. So she puts these boots on, and the horse goes from, it was just amazing. It went from just grazing with its head down in the field and looking very sad and solemn. We get the boots on. She perks up. She's like clumping around the field and dancing. It was just amazing. And we were all in tears because such a beautiful moment. And the horse passed only a couple weeks later. But one of the other thing that she asked about was to be able to be planted underneath the specific tree that she said planted, not buried. I like that part too. And that's exactly what the woman did. And later on, the lady ended up buying that boot company, and she owned it for many years. So it's a fantastic story.
It's so beautiful. It actually brought tears.
I know when I tell it, that's why I love that story, because people can feel it. They can feel the amazement and the profoundness of that story, and linking the horse with their caregiver in that way, and them being able to share that moment before she passed. It was such a huge gift. And that sparked me into a space of, you know what, I have to get out of my own way, and I have to respect what the animals say, because clearly they know way more than I do, and I should just trust them. So it's been quite the journey. But yeah, that's one of my favorite stories. Absolutely.
And, I often ponder horses, you become such a partnership with them in these sports that they must be as equally proud of doing as we are, and having that connection and being able to do it well. And I find it so sad when humans discard them if they have an injury and they can't perform like that anymore. Or, this one had a beautiful, she retired and was still very proud. But have you ever had an experience where a horse is traumatized or an animal traumatized after, being discarded like that from, they were doing a sport and then couldn't, and it must be so sad for them.
Yes, you touched on so many things in just that statement that you made alone. I mean, people who don't have working animals think that the working animals are being treated poorly. And the fact of the matter is, most of the time, what I see, as you stated, that the animals love it. They're so proud to do that work. And they, like us humans, when we have a career that we love, we shine when we're doing that work. And we feel sort of down when we are not doing it. And when we retire, sometimes we feel useless and we don't know what to do with ourselves. So there is that specific point as well, that most of the working animals, they just absolutely adore what they're doing, and they feel so vibrant and full of life when they are doing it. And they're pretty communicative on their own. So you can usually tell when a working animal doesn't want to do what they're doing. And even I've come across where they have been doing one career choice, I'll call it, one work style, and they shift into a different, like they might be doing jumping and they want to do barrel racing, for example. And it's not be that they want to not work. It might be they want to do a different kind of work. So the communication helps with that and that understanding as well. But the story that comes up in my mind, and it's not quite what you're asking, but I always trust what comes to my head, and it must be coming for a reason. Somebody must need to hear this. But I was in South Africa, and I was at a high-end barn where they had racing horses. And there was this gentleman who was a champion trainer, and we were walking through the barn, and there was specific horses that they wanted me to speak with that day, which I did. We were just strolling through, just chit-chatting, and all of a sudden, this horse caught my attention. It was almost like screaming at me. And so I said, "Can I just talk to this horse for a second that's over there?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, he's racing tomorrow. So he's just over there away from the others for whatever they were doing with him at that point." So we go over to the stall, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" Like, this horse is panicking, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And the horse begins to explain to me that it has something wrong with its heart. And it's telling me it can't race because it's going to hurt itself. And he has been trying to tell them that he can't race. And they're just not getting it. So I tell the guy this, which I think he thinks, he just gives me this look like, I don't really know if I believe you or not. So I'm like, how am I going to convince him? But I guess between the horse and myself, we looked panicked enough that we got his attention. And he said, "Okay, well, we won't race her then. I'll pull her out and I'll get her tested." But she was just tested a week ago and she seemed totally fine. He's like, I'm really on top of the well-being of my animals and their healthcare. So yeah, I find out the next day that they were really glad they didn't actually race her, because she did have an issue with her heart, and that would have created a possible death for her if she had raced. So they were able to pull her off, and they were able to do some rehab and recondition her. And then she ended up racing again later on. But if it wasn't for that specific exact moment, there could have been a big issue with her. I mean, we never know what would have happened, but we obviously see that with divine timing and intervention, that this horse was saved from that situation. So that is what come to my mind. Now, I think that what you asked was any animals who are traumatized. And I have seen some, usually the rescues, because those people who come to me to pay me money to talk to their animals are not people who treat their animals badly. So it's not my clients that I see that have treated the animals poorly, but it's usually a rescue animal that's been saved from a traumatic situation. And I think of some greyhounds pulled off the racetrack and how they are often treated poorly in different ways. But I also learned through the animals that there are some cases where they resent people, but most of the time they understand that people just don't understand. So they are willing to give people more choices or opportunities to help them later on. But yes, it does create a traumatic response in them. And we have to work through that traumatic response to help them heal. And with those race dogs, then I've seen where it takes some time, but just explaining to them the safe situation that they're in, and then them being able to see it helps them to move through it. And then they can come and have a trauma-free life where we can. One of the things that I guess I'll point out is that I don't just do animal communication. I do other energetic modalities. So we can find a modality that helps move the trauma through their being, and they no longer hold it, through many different opportunities, or sending them to another practitioner that does another type of healing modality, and we can usually help them that way. But yeah, people don't realize how forgiving the animals actually are. And the other part of that too, oh my gosh, you triggered so much. I'm sorry, now I'm rambling, but
love it.
The other thing that you just triggered was the realization that animals are like people. And my belief is that we all pick our soul journey, and we are here to learn and experience. And we have contracts. And sometimes those contracts include things that are not pleasant to see or pleasant to experience. And it's because we, as a soul, want to learn that lesson or have that experience. We don't have it in soul because we're missing the ego. But as soon as we put the ego into our being and we come to this earth, then that shifts everything. And sometimes the animals are under contract, and sometimes they're following their soul imprint or their soul path. And this is why these things occur. And I always tell people, if you don't have the opportunity to assist in the moment, or you're not capable of assisting or getting assistance, then you're not meant to interfere. That then it's something between that animal's soul and the situation and the beings that are connected at that time. And it's a hard one for a lot of people to swallow, but I've seen it and I've heard it specifically from the animals over and over. So it's pretty interesting. Sorry, I went on and on there for answered that question. See, I told you triggered a lot.
It's important. I believe that too, that we come to this planet, as an all-knowing being, but then we've chosen certain things in this lifetime to experience and explore. And sometimes they're hard, but we learn through that as well, right? So what you're saying is it's the same for animals.
Yes, I personally would never change any part of my journey, and I've had a lot of trauma in my life, but it's been what has brought me to this space and the understanding of what I have now, and it's made me the being that I am, and I know that I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if I didn't have those experiences. And the same goes with the animals as well. We have to honor that, and we have to remember that. Mm-hmm. On the same token, though, if you are given the opportunity to assist, then you are meant to. So that's how we can tell the difference, right? So then we should assist when we have the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And it's such a blessing to see so many people now more open and understanding of how animals should be treated and how they should be respected.
Yeah. And do you find there is, you were stating that there's more of an acceptance recently, but I I feel it too, that more people are just open to the fact that we are energy and that there's so much more than what we can see.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that statement. We are in an awakening opportunity right now in our society. And compared to, like, I started on this journey when I was 18. I'm old. There were not computers at that time. They were just starting. Computers were just starting, but there wasn't the internet. And so we had to learn everything from encyclopedias of all things and through other people. But where I lived, there wasn't a lot of awareness of the concepts of holistics or spirituality or psychic abilities. So it was really difficult to gather learning, and a lot of people weren't open to those concepts. And it wasn't until I moved south into the more closer to the Toronto area that I was exposed to more people who had an understanding. But even at that time, I mean, I opened it was called a New Age store. So I sold crystals and healing herbs and books and that sort of thing. And at that time, people didn't even know what reflexology or Reiki was. So I'm talking, oh my gosh, that's like 23 years ago. And we often had to explain it at our store what these things were. And now you can't look around you without having somebody who's been attuned to Reiki, and everybody knows what it is. They might not understand it deeply, but they have an awareness of it, which is a huge shift. So, and it just keeps expanding and expanding. I agree. There is a lot more people that are in an awakening and who are much more spiritually aware and more conscious of the needs of us ourselves and the need to support nature and to support the animals.
Yeah. And this awareness that we are part of nature, we're really just a two-legged animal that speaks. There's, more complex, but yeah, like we're part of it. So
I agree. Yes.
we've had a horse story, 2 of them. Yay. A dog story. Do you have a lovely cat story?
Cat story. There was a cat a few years ago who came with their owner, and the cat they thought was unwell. And we were talking about the cat's health, and that was their main focus. So that went over quite well because we were able to find a lot of things that were wrong with the cat and the cat's impression of what would assist him. And in the end, he asked, "Can I say one more thing before we stop talking?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "I need to tell my owner that she needs to take this specific path for learning, and she needs to go to this specific school." And he named everything. And actually, he wanted her to be a naturopathic doctor. And she was just sitting there with like a deer in headlights look on her face. And I'm relaying all the information he has. And he told her some also very personal information about herself and her own well-being, her health. So, they're not just interested in what they have going on, but they are interested in their whole pack and all the people who are around them. Oh my gosh, sometimes I've even had them talk about the next door neighbor. So in this particular case, she was very moved, this young lady, because she had been trying to figure out what she needed to do in her life, what was her purpose. And he handed it to her on a silver platter. And she was in tears when she left because she was like, "Oh my gosh, I have all the answers that I need for myself." And I was coming for him. And I feel like I gained more about myself as well. And so she went on and she became a naturopathic doctor. And she did phenomenal. She's still out there practicing, and it's just an amazing story. She always attributes her success to her cat, which I love. That's the first story, a cat story, that comes into my mind. But it just shows you the expansiveness of what they're aware of. I mean, they don't just talk about themselves and their own health. They talk about your situation and the situation of the people around them. They'll talk about your work. They'll talk about your finances. I've had animals give relationship advice to a husband and wife who sat here, and one whole session with the animal was marriage counseling pretty much. But it was very effective, and they are just so profoundly aware. It just is endless what they're capable of bringing to us. They also are very aware spiritually, and some animals are, I would say, more psychic than others, just like people are. They have that part of them turned on, and they're very aware of it. So sometimes they'll talk about seeing spirit. And I've had a cat who talked about a woman's mother who was coming in the house, and she described the woman's mother to a T, along with her personality. And she was saying relaying messages from the mother. And that was quite phenomenal as well. So over the years, I've seen, I won't say everything, but almost everything. It's been great.
She was seeing the mother in spirit?
Yes, she was seeing the spirit of the mother and being able to relay what the mother had to say to the daughter.
Yeah. So this is just so beautiful. Like it just shows how connected animals are to the information field and more, and they're so complex and beautiful, just as we are. It's kind of mind-boggling. So many people think they're just an animal,
Oh my goodness, yes. And I'm so glad that perception is changing. And with more and more people learning or opening up to the ability to communicate, even maybe not doing it as a profession, but even doing it for themselves, it's really changing our society and how we see the animals as a whole. Just as you said, they're not just animals. They are far beyond us, and we do not recognize it, and we do not give them the credit that they deserve. No. It's amazing. It's so amazing what they're capable of.
I became a naturopathic doctor too, and it has an animal story.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, can I hear it?
So I was in retail, and I was following my parents' dream, not my own. And one day I decided that it was becoming heavier and more difficult, and that I needed to figure out what was next in my soul path. So I remember I got down on my knees and I prayed that my path would be revealed to me. And two days later, I was walking my dog, and just the thought came into my head that you should be a doctor. And I had never thought of that before. And I would never be interested in allopathic medicine, but I went and Google searched right after. I was so excited. And I found the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, and I was enrolled within 3 months. So,
oh my gosh, you gave me shivers. I love that. Shivers just is confirmation of the truth, right? It's like that is definitely divine planning, and how amazing that your dog brought that to you.
Yeah. And I never knew where the message came from, whether it was from my higher self or, and so.
Well, your dog participated in the concept either way, I guess. We're not quite sure. We'd have to ask that dog if he brought it to you or if it came from spirit.
But it was also like you're very connected when you're out for a walk with your dog, very quiet and silent. I am in nature in the moment. So
you're much more open because you're more with animal communication or even connecting with nature. We need to be very focused, meaning present in the moment. And we need to be open and relaxed. And if we're uptight, if we're stressed, it's much more difficult to complete the communication. But like what happened with you, you were obviously more relaxed and more open and really standing in the moment to be able to receive that message so profoundly. Yeah. And thank goodness that you did. That's wonderful.
It was beautiful. I have one more question. So I believe cats or animals often come back to you, like if they're connected to your soul family. And I have a cat that I swear is a reincarnation of a cat I had when I was in my 20s. And this cat would play under the covers in a certain way. Like if you were making the bed, she would hear it and run and get under the covers. And when I lost her, I was just devastated. Like I cried for days.
Hmm.
And then we adopted a kitten when my girls were young, and this cat does exactly the same thing. So I feel like she was drawn back into our family or came back. Do you have any stories like that or any thoughts?
Yes, well, two things happen. So that first of all is just glorious. I mean, how heart moving when our animals return to us and we can really feel it. It's truly a gift. Because the animals, when they cross over, they have a choice just like we do, and they can choose to return to us or go to another life. And they also can choose to just sit in spirit and take a break. So, one of the things that I've noticed is that, yes, often animals will return to others because of the soul family, yes, concept, but also because of the lesson and the learning that they need to achieve in their lifetime. And sometimes things aren't completed, or sometimes something new has to be completed in a new body. But the other thing that's really cool that happens is that oftentimes animal spirits will visit us through other animals. So, not quite what's happening with you because your cat is reincarnated, but this is something that people don't recognize, they don't realize can occur, is that if you have a cat or a dog or any animal, it can actually impose itself on another living animal and visit you through them. So sometimes people will come to me and they'll be like, I swear this is my old dog or this is my old cat doing the exact same thing. And when I go to communicate, we recognize that it's not the animal reincarnated. It is actually the spirit of the animal that they had previously that is imposing itself on that living animal and moving through it to show specific gestures and actions to visit their loved one. So that it can be either way, which is kind of cool that you brought that up, because I always forget to tell people that this is definitely something that can happen and we can experience that way. And I've seen that many, many times where the animal comes right through and you can see their eyes change and their whole body shift and they behave in a different way entirely. Or the animal just consistently takes on the same behaviors because that animal that's in spirit teaches the living animal how to behave, like lay in this spot or do this behavior, or they really love this, so I'm going to teach you how to do this in repetition. And if you stand back, sometimes it's hard to tell whether that's an animal visiting or the animal's reincarnated, but speaking to them they can tell us. So that's kind of amazing. I do have a story that I like to share about a dog that I was communicating to the animal as a spirit. So the lady brought me a photo of her dog who had crossed over. And it was her heart dog, that dog that just hits our deepest depths of our being and links with us like we are one. So I'm communicating with her dog who has crossed over. And he says, I'm going to come back to you one day. I'm going to find my way back to you, but I'm not going to be yours. But I'm going to come to you and you're going to know it's me. And she said, well, how am I going to know it's you? And he says, the password is, or the special code word is grilled cheese. And I was like, I didn't know what to say to her. I'm like, that's all he's giving me. She's like, okay, that's really weird, Sheila. I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't know what to tell you. He's like, oh, no, I'll make myself known. So she was a dog trainer. And a couple of years later, she gets this car, pulls up in her driveway, which she doesn't train from her house. She doesn't tell people where she lives, but this guy shows up with these two kids in the car and a dog. And he comes to her door and says, I need you to help me with my dog. It's unruly. It doesn't listen. I've taken it to other trainers. It just won't work. Everybody keeps telling me to come to you. She's like, well, I'm like, oh, I'm not really doing like work right now. I'm actually off. I can't remember. She had some kind of surgery on her arm or something. Anyways, she's saying like, I don't have any way to help you right now. You'll like maybe later on. And here, let me send you to someone else. And he's like, no, I specifically need you. I'm telling you, I've been through multiple trainers. Like, this dog will not listen to anybody. And I'm told you're the only one who can help. So she's like, oh, okay. Something just compelled her to say, let me see the dog. Because he was saying, it's in the car with the kids. So she said, okay, let me see the dog. The dog jumps out of the car, looks at her, comes right to her, goes in a down position and looks right up at her. And the guy says, what's going on? She goes, I don't know. And he's like, yeah, usually the dog is jumping all over someone and is so like not focused and doesn't take any commands. And she didn't even say a word. It just bowed to her. And so she just said, I'm not sure. And so she started to pet the dog and she's looking at the dog. And she is starting to feel like this dog feels really familiar. Oh my gosh, she started to get shivers. She said, is that you? And the dog looked right at her and started wagging his tail and like was so excited, but still really, really well behaved. And the man said, what are you doing to my dog? Like, this is really freaking me out. And she said, can I ask you a question? And he says, yeah. She says, does grilled cheese mean anything to you? And he goes, oh, I keep telling the kids not to feed the dog grilled cheese, but she seems to love it. And she started laughing and the dog jumped up and started licking her all over the face. And she said, oh my gosh. And she says, I think your dog will be fine now. And so she said, can you call me and let me know how you do? If you need me, I'll help you. So the dog literally like snuggles up to her, gives her a hug. She thanks the dog. They visit for a little bit. They leave. The guy calls her like a few days later and says, I need to tell you, I don't know what the heck you did, but you are magic. Like, this dog is the most well-behaved dog I've ever had in my life. It listens to everything. She is so well-behaved. It's an entirely different dog and you are amazing. And I'm going to send everybody to you because you're the best trainer ever. And she's like, I really didn't do anything, but I acknowledged that was my dog who had crossed. And she tried to explain it to him. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay, whatever, it worked. So the dog never really was hers again, but they had that interaction and it was so heart moving. I mean, can you imagine having that experience? And she just like bawled for days because not the sadness, but the joy and the amazement of how that could happen. And she called me to tell me about it right away. And it's just something I love to repeat because even though your pet doesn't come back to you, sometimes they have another journey to experience, but they will somehow cross your path at some point. You have to be paying attention. You never know what's going to happen, but that one I love too.
Yeah. I think there's just, such relief for many of us that love animals to know that they come back or have choice in, what they do next, just like we do. Like, I think we're devastated because we think we'll never see them again or that it's the end, and it's heartbreaking. Like, I really wish they would live as long as we do.
Yeah. And hey, that's a great point too. They don't live as long as we do because they don't need to. They experience what they need to in a much shorter time. And we as humans, we hold on to life and they accept death. They accept death as a transition. They recognize, okay, I'm here, but I cross and my energy just changes and then I can go be something else. They're not stuck like we are or holding on to that particular occurrences, that life that we have. And we sometimes stifle our spirits, our souls, because we do that. And if we were more like the animals, we'd probably transition a lot quicker and over and have multiple experiences. So I think we would live much differently.
Yeah. So your experience is that they actually understand, the transition and the movement into energy and back. And whereas we're so often blind to it, or have no idea how
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's
I see that they often describe to me that it's just a transition into another space and time. It's like their energy shifts from that physical being, but they're always saying like, you can still see me, I can still see you, you can still communicate with me, and I can come back to you, or we can experience life in a different way. They're not I mean, they're sad to leave their loved ones. It's not like they're like, woohoo, I get to pass. They're sad because it's a completion of a journey, but they're also not afraid of passing like we are. Typically, I have seen a few, but it's usually the owners, the caregivers' perception of death that gets imposed on the animal that makes them fearful. Or they know that their caregiver is going to not be okay without them, and then they are really worried about that. But for the most part, they are very accepting of crossing. They're also, one thing I've noticed is that timing is also important for them. They'll know, like, I can go anytime. And I get a lot of people who, we have the wonderful opportunity of being able to help the animals transition if they're suffering. So we can help to make that choice for them. And it's a hard choice to make because we don't know if we're making the right choice. And when people contact me when they're in that situation, I love being the go-between, the communicator that helps them to be able to understand whether it is the right time for the pet or not, and what the pet feels like, what the pet wants before they transition, and whether they think that this is exactly the right way to do it, or how they want their remains to be placed afterwards, what they want to say to their caregiver about what their life has been. It's a great opportunity to have that understanding from your own pet that, yes, this is the right time to go, or no, we need to wait 2 weeks, or I think I can get through this, or let's try this first. Or so it takes the onus off of the person feeling like they're making a choice without the participation of the animal, and they're sort of stealing the life away from the animal. Where if you can hear exactly what your pet has to say, then you know that's a joint choice. And it's also one of my favorite things to do in the services that I offer, because it is helping the pets and the owners, the people, so massively in those situations. And it really changes their lives because of it.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Such incredible stories. We could share for 2 hours. I just love it. Do you have any gems you would leave people? Anything that just to share as a final word of wisdom?
I would have naturally picked something else, but in this actual moment, I'm really getting that it's extremely important for people to realize that animals are often mirrors for us on our journey. And this little tidbit goes a long way to know. I have seen so many times where animals are mirroring their caregiver or someone in their household with emotional components or physical components, and that the animal itself is not really the one holding that, but they're expressing it. They're trying to heal. They're natural healers, and they're trying to process the energy on our behalf. So when sometimes you see an animal with thyroid problem, you will see the owner with a thyroid problem. You'll see the animal with anxiety. Someone in the house has anxiety. So I always tell people, let's look what's happening in the whole household, because sometimes if we correct ourselves and the issues that we hold, our animal becomes magically better. And I've seen that firsthand in my own personal experience where that has occurred. So that's the tidbit I'd give, is like, pay attention to any issues or concerns that you have about your pet, and then look at yourself and those other people that are living in the same space and identify who is in comparison to that. And then everybody try to heal themselves. And as a whole, as a unit, everybody will be healthier, and you can move beyond that concern based on everybody being treated rather than just the pet.
So beautiful. Yeah, so to see them as a mirror, and what do we need to learn from this, right?
Yes, and I bet you see that in your practice as well. I bet you, if you start to ask what's going on with the pets in the household, you will start to see that really come forward.
Yeah.
Because they're always trying to help heal us.
Yeah. Well, I've learned that every patient is a mirror. So I learn from them as much as they learn from me.
Oh, yes, that is also very true. Very true.
Yeah. So, and how do people reach out to find you if they would like to?
Thank you. Yes, they can find me at my website is ultimatehealingconcepts.com. And that is far easier than my name, SheilaTrecartin.ca. So ultimatehealingconcepts.com is the best way to get a hold of me. And all my information is on the website there. And they can search my name on Facebook or Instagram because I also have those as well as ways to connect with me.
Perfect. And I'll put that in the description to make it easy for people to find you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to sit with you today.
And for everyone out there, don't forget, don't give away your power to anyone else. Be the creator of your own life. Spiral up, spiral out.